Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying today's sessions as much as I have. My name is Allegra, and welcome to our panel on faith-based responses to climate migration. My full name is Allegra Lovejoy, and I'm an alumna of Yale Divinity School and Yale School of the Environment, where I've worked as a researcher on faith-based responses to climate change. I'm also involved with the Episcopal Church and other faith communities, seeking to work in partnership on addressing climate change and social concerns. I am happy to be joined today by staff from the amazing Episcopal Relief and Development and by a member of the community of Santa Giudio, two of the many faith-based organizations and communities dedicated to humanitarian action, advocacy, and long-term partnership. During a time when cooperation in the international community is particularly challenged, I appreciate the work of these two organizations, as well as many others who are presenting during the symposium, in retaining or deepening their commitments to partnership and long-term relationship. I also want to emphasize that not all work connected to climate migration involves international relocation. Internal displacement, as well as working with communities to build stability and resilience, are also critical. And we'll hear about all three of those experiences in this session. Some of the quietest, yet possibly most impactful work is preventive and collaborative, oriented towards resilience and adaptation to changing economic, political, and environmental factors, not just reactive to a crisis. That's where faith-based organizations step in a distinctive way. Their work is shaped not only by urgency, but also by values of solidarity, accompaniment, hospitality, and even a sacred sense of home on this precious planet. So it's my pleasure to introduce Angel Venegas and Chitsat Miotant from Episcopal Relief and Development, which has committed itself to climate resilience as one of its 4 core priorities. Through its partnerships in rural, vulnerable communities, ERD helps households adapt by strengthening livelihoods, promoting sustainable agriculture, supporting disaster preparedness, and local resilience. It's also my pleasure to introduce Pietro Bartoli, a member of the community of Santa Giudio. The community brings a deep-rooted Catholic lay faith commitment to hospitality and migration. Through humanitarian corridors, welcoming networks, and local community integration, they embody an ethic of building bridges, not walls, for displaced persons. As we engage our panel today, I invite us to keep in mind 3 interlinked questions. Firstly, how do faith-based organizations encounter and interpret the intersection of climate change, displacement, and migration? Second, what do faith communities uniquely bring to that work? How do faith and values shape relationship and accompaniment? And how do these approaches influence broader coalitions? And lastly, what approaches can we learn from this work to inform how other organizations, partners, and governments might approach their piece of the puzzle? So with that, I'll invite our first panelist, Chitsat, to introduce herself and her organization. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. I am very honored to be here today to speak on behalf of Episcopal Relief and Development. My name is Chitsat Miotant. I am a program officer with Episcopal Relief and Development within the Climate Resilience Cluster. And today, as Allegra stated, we will be talking about climate migration and how Episcopal Relief and Development has worked with our local partners in terms of resolving and also enhancing livelihoods within this climate migration context. Please allow me to share my screen. All right, so as I said, we're from Episcopal Relief and Development, and just a little bit about who we are and where we work. We are affiliated with Episcopal Church of the United States. We essentially are the development arm, and we work with the Anglican and Episcopal churches throughout the world. And not only the churches and the development arms of the churches, we also work with ecumenical and secular organizations as well. And these are the regions where we are currently present. So we are present in Latin America, we're present in Africa, and we're also present in some parts of Asia as well. And the main theme that we will be talking about is how Episcopal relief and development works. And it is through our theory of change, as you can see here. So, what does it really mean? It means that we are focusing on these four themes here: dignity, trust, hope, and love. What does it really mean? So we're focusing on local leadership, meaning changes last when communities themselves lead it and we strengthen their capacity and trust them to make decisions. That's a part of our dignity. And in terms of trust, true resilience links social, environmental, economic well-being, not one at a time, but together, and that is our trust piece. And in terms of the hope and love, we're making sure that transformation grows through trust and love. And then our next slide, we're going to talk about what our priorities are within Episcopal Relief and Development. Allegra touched upon it briefly, but our programmatic areas are divided into four. As you may see here: early childhood development, women and girls, and climate resilience, which is where Angel and I are a part of. So we focus on investing in communities to strengthen their resilience and enhance livelihoods impacted by climate disasters. And we also have the disaster response team as well, where we work very closely with our local partners to respond in emergency situations as well. And today specifically, within my portfolio, I work with two local partners in DRC. And these two partners are located in Aru and Bukavu. So Aru is part of the Ituri province, and Bukavu is a part of the South Kivu province. So again, it is two different partners that we're working with within these areas. So of course today, the topic of our webinar is the climate migration or climate displacement. But I think when we talk about climate displacement, we can't not talk about the violence enhanced or violence powered migration as well. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of a comparison between these two areas and the type of displacement the areas are experiencing right now. So within Aru, specifically within Ituri province, the displacement is caused by the intercommunal violence and insecurities. So we're talking different villages having issues over livestock, or it is petty theft, so on and so forth. But they are important and big enough that it has uprooted families, and some have now started to return back to the villages that they fled from, while others remain displaced. And for the context of Bukavu, these are individuals who have been displaced by climate shocks within Kalehe Health Zone. It was mostly because of floods and landslides. And unfortunately, in 2025, the M23 rebels from Rwanda had taken over that region as well. So now adding on to the climate migration, it is also violence enhanced migration as well. So within these two areas, what we're focusing on is social reintegration. When we talk about working with the displaced population, what were we talking about? We're talking about how do we build trust within these communities? How do we focus back on building of their livelihoods again? And what does recovery mean? What does reintegration mean? And specifically for Bukavu, right now it is still in very fragile context, so we cannot continue programming as normal, but we're trying to reach to Bukavu in our emergency lens. So talking about continuity, we're still maintaining connection amid insecurity and access limits. And now I'll go a little bit more into Aru. So, who is working in Aru? Who is our local implementer? So, again, as I said, Episcopal Relief and Development works with Anglican and Episcopal churches and their development arms, and also just a reminder, also secular and ecumenical organization as well. But in the context of Aru, we're working with Diocese of Aru under the Anglican Church of Democratic Republic of Congo, who is implementing this mission through their Diocesan Development Office. And they focus a lot on mobilizing local communities in terms of improving health, environmental stewardship, self-reliance, governance, and peace. So, who are the participants for this specific project? So within Aru, there are two types of groups, and one is the IDPs, internally displaced population. So for this specific group, they are families still displaced within Aru. They haven't settled back into their homes, or they haven't decided where they will where they will eventually settle. So they're staying with host communities, and that's currently in the Nyacha village within Ituri province. And because they are living with host communities, they do lack a stable means of livelihood. And as for returnees in Besse, um, these are families who have fled, so they were previously displaced, but now they have returned back within their own communities. And now we're focusing on how to rebuild their homes, how to build their livelihoods, and how to focus on the social health of this community. So, how are we doing this re-entry and social adaptation within these communities? We are focusing on our financial linkages. In the case of Episcopal Relief and Development, we are technical experts of savings with education. We work with local communities and we bring them together. We train them on the methodology, and the local communities come together. They form groups, they start saving together, and at the end of each cycle, when they get their profits, they end up also getting benefit as well. And we're also focusing on vocational training. So what does it look like? It looks like carpentry for youth. It looks like masonry, carpentry, and also tailoring, sewing, so on and so forth. And of course, peace dialogues when people are displaced, especially because of violence. There needs to be involvement of the local government. There needs to be involvement of the village chiefs to have these peace talks. And who is essentially facilitating these conversations? It's the church. It's the local church that is facilitating these conversations. And also, we're focusing on WASH as well. And I'll go a little bit over these pictures. This is a young man trying to learn how to do construction here. He's actually at one of the training centers. He's learning how to essentially do the work and also rebuild his own home when he has returned back to his village. And this is one of the pipes that we have helped install within the community. And this is also one of the toilets that we have helped construct at a school. And another one is community members being given trees for them to plant as an effort to fully resettle and reintegrate back into their homes. And another partner of ours, Bukavu. So who are we working in Bukavu with? We're working with Diocese of Bukavu, again, who's also part of the Anglican Church of, excuse me, it's DR Congo, who leads community development and peace initiatives in South Kivu through the development office as well. So very similar to Diocese of Aru, they work with a multitude of groups, participants. So they focus on GBV, they focus on youth training, they focus on disaster recovery, and mainly local resilience. So a little bit different from Diocese of Aru. Within Bukavu, Diocese of Bukavu is working with climate disaster impacted families. So specifically flood affected families in Kalehe Health Zone. So these are household displaced by the 2023 floods and landslides. So specifically in this situation, where the climate actually had the impact, they are no longer able to um, inhabit that area. So the government has designated a new area within the same village for these individuals to move to. So since it is a official redesignation, they can officially and confidently start their rebuilding process, and that's what Diocese of Bukavu is doing. And unfortunately, as I mentioned in 2025, because of the newly occurring local conflict, families have uprooted again. And they have moved all throughout. Some have moved to Burundi, some have moved to the Ituri province, and some who have remained in these project sites, they can go around, they can move around. So specifically in the environmental or climate migration context, what have we done through Diocese of Bukavu? We have helped with the environmental restoration, so tree planting and reforestation. So as you can see here, youth, peace, and sports activities. These are very important because this is one of activities that actually improve the psychosocial state of a lot of the community members. So events like this, a lot of the people enjoy, and it gives them identity and meaning. And then just like Diocese of Aru, Diocese of Bukavu participates in Savings with Education as well, and then also conflict prevention and peace building sessions, just very similar to Diocese of Aru. The church is facilitating conversations around peace as well. And as you can see here, there are some tree planting happening here in the first two pictures, and this is a football match. And then the fourth picture is a picture of the board of one savings group. So the saving groups determined who was going to be the president, the secretary, the treasurer, the vice president. And moving on, I won't necessarily state off everything here, but just an example of some of the activities that took place. So I talked about wash. So I talk about constructing toilets and hand washing stations. That's here. And then also um, agriculture and income generating activities, saving groups, and for Diocese of Bukavu, some activities include, as I mentioned, the football matches to raise awareness on peace building and providing NFIs, and also some items for income generating activities. Um, and our next slide is, so why these churches? Why are we working with these faith networks? And especially within the context of displacement. Faith actors are always there. They're present before, during, and after when the crisis happens, and they offer continuity and trust. And historically and time, faith institution has served as resilience hubs, and also for communication, care, and safety. They reach remote and marginalized groups. And a lot of the faith spaces have provided material aid, spiritual grounding, and it has also, especially within the fragile context of migration, it has also helped with addressing the loss and identity. And it also provides culturally rooted healing and counseling, which restores dignity and belonging. And there has been research done that when we go into these fragile contexts and provide psychosocial support, when we don't provide culturally relevant support or locally relevant support, it actually does more harm than good. So it is important for us to actually engage the local actors. And also, faith leaders are always there to contribute in terms of early warning, preparedness, and social cohesion. And they are the backbone. And them being the faith actors being there, it leads to inclusive, holistic, and sustained recovery. We're trying to make sure that we're actually essentially hitting all parts of what resilience means. And how does Episcopal Relief and Development come into this place when the local partners are doing all the work? So where do we sit? So the biggest piece of our work at Episcopal Relief and Development is our accompaniment and resilience. So it goes back to our main theory of change. So giving the dignity, trust, hope, and love. We are walking with our partner through demonstrative leadership. So when we're working with our partners, we're standing in a place of trust, humility, and shared accountability. We're not just going in as donors and just asking for data, and we're not just telling them this needs to happen, that needs to happen. That's not what's happening. We are actually listening to the local actors and really sitting down with them, brainstorming and what accompaniment looks like in practice for partners. And then they go and replicate that in their communities. And another big piece is institutional strengthening. Again, the local entities, they have the indigenous knowledge and they are the backbone of those societies. And they're more than capable of doing an implementation, but where we step in is essentially providing support in terms of financial health reviews, coaching and monitoring, evaluation, and learning support. And we also help these dioceses build strong governance, finance, and safeguarding systems that so that they're also kind of preparing themselves for future funding opportunities as well that actually goes beyond the project cycles with Episcopal Relief and Development. And of course, empowering local leadership. We, again, like we do not manage, we create space for partners to lead, and we support in reflection and learning through joint problem solving. And adaptive partnerships. So, right now, what's happening in Diocese of Bukavu, again, we started this partnership in terms of supporting the climate displacement, but now that programming cannot happen because of the violence on the ground. So what are we doing now? Instead of the livelihood support, we're focusing more on the emergency support. Even though we may not be able to continue the project as we had intended in 2024, we're still reaching the most vulnerable communities in terms of cash transfer, in terms of NFIs. So that's adaptive partnership in an example. And I will now pass the stage on to um, my coworker, Angel, and he can talk about his portfolio and where else in the world Episcopal Relief is present in terms of our response to climate migration.
Thank you very much, Chitsat. Hello, everyone. I'm Angel Venegas. I am a program officer at Episcopal Relief and Development. I'm also part of the Climate Resilience Initiatives team, and I'm going to share my screen at this moment. All right. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Great. And so picking up on where Chitsat left off, and if I could have a check, if someone could confirm that my slides are showing or my slide is showing, that'd be great.
You're not in present mode, so you have to click down or it's in the purple button further down. Yep, there you go.
Thank you, Pedro. All right.
We went back.
Oh, did it go back? All right. I wonder. Let's see. Is it showing now as presenter mode?
No, yeah, it says audience window. I think we see what you see.
Okay. Maybe what we could do, Chitsat, could you present and I go off of the slides that you show on your screen?
Angel, just hover over the present full screen and then just
Yeah.
click the purple field once. That's it.
That's
Yep.
good, thanks.
All right, let's see. For some reason, it keeps clicking out for me.
No worries. Let me share the screen for you then.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for your patience.
You may have to stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you, Chitsat. Great. So picking up where Chitsat left off, I am going to share a little bit more about who I am and what I do. And so I work more closely with partners in the Latin American region. And these are partners that work with communities that experience daily realities of climate change, migration, and adaptation. While Chitsat highlighted communities on the move, I'll focus on those choosing to stay in place and how faith and partnership are helping them build resilience also in place. Next slide, please. Great. And so climate pressures are, you go back one slide, please, Chitsat. One slide back, please.
Sorry, it's giving me trouble. One sec.
Oh, it's okay. This is real teamwork in action. All right. So really here, what I am trying to relay is that climate pressures are reshaping life across Latin America and the Caribbean. Families are navigating hard choices. Stay, move. Again, my colleague Chitsat shared about how people on the move, those displaced and seeking new stability, exist, and I'm going to be once again choosing to focus on those who remain, those determined to stay and adapt in place. Our role at Episcopal Relief and Development is to walk alongside both, strengthening livelihoods, faith, and belonging so that migration becomes a choice and not just a last resort. Next slide, please. All right. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, accompaniment takes on many different forms, from savings groups to reforestation to leadership formation type programming. At the heart of it all, really, it's about walking together through faith, solidarity, and shared resilience. In the next two examples that I'm going to be sharing, I'm going to be highlighting the realities in Amazonian Brazil and Honduras, and showing how life looks like on the ground. And staying on this slide, the Diocese of Amazonia is a valued partner. In the Diocese of Amazonia and the programming that we accompany, they have worked with 48 riverine, indigenous, and Quilombola communities, all about 5,500 people across vast distances where the river is the only road. Um, Also, since 2022, when their programming kicked off as emergency type programming, they have walked alongside a very specific community, the Warao Venezuelan migrant population that have settled in the state of Pará. These efforts are grounded in consultation and respect for indigenous governments, ensuring people shape their own recovery. Also, the partnerships here and go beyond the church. So the Diocese of Amazonia also collaborates with the Institute of International Education in Brazil and also the Public Defender's Office to strengthen land rights, livelihoods, and climate adaptation. What's remarkable here truly is that while climate change and privatization of land push some families to migrate to cities, many want to stay in place, and the diocese helps make that possible. So developing and promoting the idea of development in place where faith communities thrive without having to leave home. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have a story of Christiane, one of the artisans in a Needs of Education group. She said, "This is the first time I've made my own money. I feel independent." And that's really what accompaniment looks like. Empowerment that comes from within. It's not just about delivering aid, but about creating a space for people to rediscover their own strength. We've learned that staying, listening, and growing together, that's really how faith transforms into resilience. Next slide, please. All right, now moving on to Honduras. Here, we highlight Bangladesh's work. Bangladesh stands for Anglican Development Agency for Honduras. And in Honduras, we partner with them. They are the development arm of the Episcopal Diocese of Honduras. Their Savings with Education work now includes 40 active groups with more than 800 members, 3/4 of them women. Together, they've saved nearly $190,000 US dollars and issued over 100,000 in small loans for livelihoods and education. Beyond these savings, also the program promotes food security through home gardens and water filter initiatives that reach families in the dry corridor. That's a highlight new piece of their work in 2025, an area that's absolutely hit hardest by drought. What stands out is that these aren't one-time projects. They're really building community infrastructure for the long term. And Bangladesh is now undergoing an organizational assessment to refine its strategy and prepare for sustainable growth. All this accompaniment is discernment, and it's really all about walking with a partner as it defines its next faithful step. Next slide, please. Here, we focus on faithful presence, a shared transformation. So across contexts from the Amazon to Honduras, progress is absolutely not linear. Communities experience return, they experience relapse and renewal. Accompaniment means staying present through uncertainty, silence, and slow progress. It means trusting the process and respecting partners who keep going even when visible results pause. Staying is an act of faith. It's showing up long enough for transformation to take root and last. Next slide, please. All right, well, we thank you for walking with us, Chitsat and I, through this journey of sharing more about the work that we're involved with, the work that we do in accompanying our partners, and really this work, whether in displacement, adaptation, or recovery, really only happens because of relationships that are grounded in faith, partnership, and hope. And so as a takeaway message, really, together, we're not just responding to crises, we're nurturing the roots of resilience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angel and Chitsat. That was very deep, and I'm having so many more questions and interest in each of the partners and places that you spoke about. I think there's just probably endless richness of stories there. So I also invite participants who are listening in on this session, please feel free to put your follow-up questions in the chat so we can come back to that afterwards. For the time being, I would actually love to hand the stage over to Pietro and hear about your work and Sant'Egidio's work, and then we'll circle up together as a group. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Allegra, for the invitation. Thank you, Angel and Chitsat, for presenting. Thank you for the team for putting this all together. Technologically, we always have challenges, I know, and it takes a lot of work to make these things happen. So I'm going to present a little bit about the community of Sant'Egidio. I trust that we've done enough of these now, and let's see if we can get this right. I will take silence as a positive. Perfect. So my name is Pietro, as Allegra said, and I'm from the community of Sant'Egidio. The community of Sant'Egidio is a lay Catholic community of believers that was founded in Rome in 1968 and is now present internationally around the world, that focuses on people of faith voluntarily living out the gospel message as we understand it through service to the poor. In particular, I'm going to be talking about a program we've now been running since 2016 called the Humanitarian Corridors, which was our response to the migration crisis in Europe, especially. But it's really been born out of longstanding relationships, longstanding presence in many, many countries. So we'll start just by explaining a little bit more about what Sant'Egidio is, and then I'll go into the actual program itself and how it works. I'll come back to this photo in a moment. Great. So the community of Sant'Egidio. Sant'Egidio, for those who don't speak Italian, is just St. Giles. And that name comes from this specific church in Rome, which we see here, where our community got its name. It was the first place in New York City. It was not actually New York City, that's where I am, in Rome, where our community gathered. Our community can be really understood through 3 Ps. That's prayer, peace, and the poor. And I think each one of those is important for understanding who we are and how we act and behave in the world, especially relative, to many, many different actors who are all doing wonderful work. So first is prayer. Prayer for us is really central because, as I said, we are a religious community first and foremost. And so we talk about values, talk about goals, talk about mission, talk about purpose. For us, that really does stem from a deep, deep spiritual and religious understanding that needs to always be nourished in prayer. We are working for peace, for a new world, for justice, for the rights of all, for the underserved, the cry of the poor. We work for peace through the poor, effectively, right? Understanding that, as Pope Paul VI said, if you want peace, work for justice. And justice really does mean especially care for the poor and the marginalized. As I said, we were founded in 1968 in Rome by a group of then high schoolers who just wanted to pray together and realized that this faith of theirs was calling them to serve. And this community has now grown. We're present in over 70 countries, including many in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, which I'll soon address. But wherever we are, and I emphasize we, what the community is, what Sant'Egidio is people dedicated to their faith and dedicated to serving others because of their faith. That has taken many, many different expressions, from service to folks living on the street, for example, as we do here in New York, to running children's programs, which we call the School of Peace, which happens all over the world, from the DRC, which I was really glad to see Chitsat mention, because I'll get to that as well, and to Latin America, to El Salvador, to Mexico, to Asia, and everywhere in between. All of these are expressions of a conviction that we have that every person in the world has something to contribute, that no one is too young, too poor, too old, too rich, too whatever, to not be able to do something. And confident that if we were all to do that, and we were all to give others the opportunity to do that as well, that a new world would really be possible. Wherever we are, our communities try to respond to the needs that our neighbors, our brothers and sisters around us, are experiencing. So it was impossible in the early 2000s, but I mean forever, but especially in the early 2000s, the early 2010s in Europe, for us not to notice the migrant crisis. And so having had long-standing relationships that I will also elaborate on further, we developed the humanitarian corridors. And what we see pictured here back in this first slide is the return of Pope Francis from Lesbos in April 2016 with 12 Syrian refugees that he accompanied personally through the humanitarian corridors. Here in the middle, we see Daniela, who is the coordinator for the humanitarian corridors of Sant'Egidio, working with the Vatican, working with the Italian government and others. This was the first group of people that we were able to bring safely into Italy. So let's talk a little bit about what the humanitarian corridors are. I'll tell you how and by whom, talk about for whom, talk about the actual structure of the program. And then towards the end, I'll underline how exactly this fits into the climate crisis, climate-induced migration. And as I think Angel especially was emphasizing, the importance in preventative work, in ensuring that justice is achieved at home, that it's not so much a responsive obligation that we have, but a preventative one is one that Allegra was also sharing at the beginning. So Sant'Egidio, as I said, is present in many, many countries in Africa and the Middle East. And by present, I mean that there are people like me, like others all over the world, who are dedicated to their brothers and sisters and in service. So we've been intimately aware of the sufferings of people in these situations, and intimately aware, because we're also present in Europe, of what it meant, the moral imperative to welcome, or rather to ignore, right? I mean, what was happening, what it meant to ignore, and the moral imperative to respond to the needs of our brothers and sisters around the world. So Sant'Egidio first launched the humanitarian corridors as a pilot initiative, kind of more internally, with the Conference of Italian Bishops, the Waldensian Table, which is a Protestant denomination in Italy, and the Bishops' Conference and the local Caritas chapter. We began with just a few people, bringing them over to Italy and integrating them slowly into the country. That program was so successful that it was then picked up through a formal agreement with the Italian government. That in turn was successful enough that it has now been picked up by a series of other countries: France, Germany, Switzerland, Andorra, and a handful of others that I'll also get to as well. Sant'Egidio is the operating entity for the program, both on the ground and in the host countries, and is responsible for basically soup to nuts the accompaniment of these individuals. So let's talk a little bit more about what actually happens. The humanitarian corridors are a refugee resettlement program specifically for refugees, mostly from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, the Horn of Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Because it's a legal program that functions with the collaboration of states and non-state actors, but mostly state actors, we are working with the UNHCR population, the population that UNHCR defines as vulnerable, right? So maybe many of us are familiar with this, but we're talking mostly about single women with children, victims of trafficking, persons with disabilities, victims of torture, and the severely ill. And Sant'Egidio, having presence in many of these countries, in Lebanon and Yemen, in Syria, and in the refugee camps themselves, is intimately familiar with the people on the ground, unfortunately, their situations and the cases that they face, and is responsible then for selecting these individuals, processing their refugee applications and acceptance, transporting them safely to their host country, thereby avoiding the dangerous route that many were taking through the Mediterranean, which was really what had triggered for us the need to respond and create a safe passage. So they are brought to their host country and welcomed by local organizations, often the local community Sant'Egidio, which then provides hand-holding and accompaniment and integration, really, until these individuals and throughout are capable of standing on their own, as they often are very quickly, and providing really immense value to their local communities. This is just a little image that it's helpful to be reminded of how intimate, how tender salvation, in a sense, can be for people. This is an image of folks arriving in Rome for the first time. So again, for whom? Who does Sant'Egidio and the humanitarian corridors target? See if we can use that word when selecting. Our guiding principles are family unity, risk and vulnerability, the personal knowledge of the person, the family, and the case, and the possibility of their integration. What that means is that, if we can, as best we can, we try to transport families together, families that are particularly at risk of harm, threat, immense poverty, violence, etc., in their home country, or more likely in the refugee camp that they are in. The personal knowledge and relationship that has been built up over the years, unfortunately, because it has been years for many that they are in the camps, between members of the community of Sant'Egidio who are present in the camp and the individuals. And then consideration, of course, of where they will be placed, where there is availability, and whether these people are a good fit. And this is where I mentioned the practical components, right? The regular presence on the ground and the deep connection with other local actors, specifically in the host country. We realized that this is not a perfect scenario, right? It would be much better for everyone who needed to leave, everyone who was forced to migrate, to be guaranteed safe passage and avoid the dangers and the threats that come with unprotected passage. But unfortunately, that isn't the case for the program at the moment, and we are operating within a very limited and strict boundary of what the states that we partner with are currently allowing. That, of course, doesn't mean and doesn't preclude Sant'Egidio as a partner of governments and as a movement of faith of constantly advocating for more and more and more acceptance of refugees, because there is really a moral imperative for those of us, especially in the global West, to welcome our brothers and sisters from wherever they are in the world, for all those who have, to share generously with those who need. So how does it work? Again, practically, there's a personal accompaniment process. That means that Sant'Egidio is responsible from the beginning to the end, interviewing, selecting, and then transporting individuals and families from the camps through their transit and into their host country. Sant'Egidio is present every step of the way and remains present after arrival, ensuring that the new arrivals, the new Europeans, as they're often called, are properly welcomed, properly integrated, and properly situated for themselves to have a flourishing life after leaving behind the refugee camp. By the numbers, Sant'Egidio, through the humanitarian corridors, has welcomed over 8,000 people since 2016. Of course, some might say this is a fairly small number, but for an organization like Sant'Egidio that operates primarily on a volunteer basis, because all of us have day jobs as well, this is really something. And it's an expression of what I was talking about at the beginning, which is that everyone can do something. Sant'Egidio's process, as I was saying also earlier, with respect to our local communities, is just to do what we can do, which sounds simple, but it means that we have also a tremendous responsibility to live out the call to serve. We have the responsibility to respond to the call for hope that many refugees, that many migrants are shouting and not being heard. So these 8,000 people have been mostly from Syria and Afghanistan, with some from Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen, and Iraq, a handful of others. And they've been predominantly welcomed in Italy, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, and France. These individuals then, as I was saying with integration, not only find work, not only end up being enormously valuable members of their communities socially, so on, but they're also often integrated directly into Sant'Egidio itself and end up participating in the Youth for Peace, which is our kind of younger wing, and the services that we provide in those local communities, whether it be, as we saw back here, meal preparation for folks on the street, or visitation to folks who are living in nursing homes and institutes, visitation to prisoners, and all sorts of other things that Sant'Egidio does locally. We can think, which many of you are familiar with, the phenomenon of smaller European towns, villages, and cities that continually shrink, or have been continually shrinking because of declining birth rates. And it's incredible to see how much life these new Europeans can bring into these communities. And I'm going to get to this in a little bit coming up, but Sant'Egidio is particularly attentive to the reality, both of the refugee, but also of the host country or the host city. And in that selection process, we really consider how to best create a relationship, a situation that can be fruitful. I'll come back to that. How are we funded then? As I was saying, we're entirely volunteer, or primarily volunteer. Well, the operation is indeed covered by us, by Sant'Egidio and the partner organizations, Caritas, the Waldensian Table, and now in part other religious organizations as well. Sponsorship, likewise, is only covered by the sponsoring local communities, usually faith-based organizations like Sant'Egidio. The only cost to governments are healthcare and welfare, which they usually provide, to refugees and to all legally permitted residents as well. So it really is a low-cost project to be done by those who are responding and calling, or excuse me, responding to a call. So what are the lessons learned? Small-scale integration works better for all. This is what I was talking about just before. That we realize that we have to be conscious, unfortunately, of the reality of xenophobia, of nativism, of a resistance to welcoming folks from other countries, refugees who may look, who may act, who may cook, who may eat, whatever it is, differently than where they're being welcomed. Unfortunately, that is simply a reality. But small-scale integration often does break down that barrier. 1, 2, 3 families at a time can be welcomed without feeling overwhelming and are immensely transformative for that local community in then cultivating an advocate, basically turning that entire community into an advocate globally or locally, if you want to talk about a country, for promoting refugee resettlement and integration. Obviously, from an economic perspective, I don't think I have to tell anybody here how successful the arrival of people who are eager to work, eager to contribute, eager to prove their worth is, both from just a dollars or euros standpoint, but also from a cultural standpoint that returns energy, vigor, dreaming to a local community. And to that end, it really does demonstrate that everyone can make a difference, right? The arrival of someone who is putting behind them trauma, violence, despair, death, and arriving to a new place and saying, thank you for welcoming me, a new life is possible, and living it out immediately is really reinvigorating for the local community as well. How does this all relate to the climate crisis? Many of the people that Sant'Egidio has been helping are, of course, fleeing violence between states, violence between non-state actors. But the reality is, as we all know here, that the climate crisis will only further and exacerbate those crises. And while we might have hope that violent crises between state and non-state actors might be resolved through mediation, whether it's bilateral, trilateral, or more, the reality is that the global climate crisis requires global climate action by many, many more parties. So we can expect that the need will only increase. There's also a reality that I think we need to confront, which is the difficulty in quote unquote pitching, as I say, the moral imperative of welcoming climate refugees. Why do I say this? I say it from a realist perspective. That is, when dealing with communities that might be more hesitant to accept refugees, it's possible to pull on heartstrings. And although Angel made a good point in distinguishing between charity and relationship, some people sometimes just need to be convinced that they can do charity and told that they can do charity. And it can be a good starting point. On the other hand, climate migration is a harder pitch to make, I think, because it is unclear, or it's harder to make clear the difficulties, the urgency, and the inhumane conditions that people will be facing. They won't be facing bombs or destroyed limbs or things like that because they're starving. They'll just be starving. But the authority of religious actors is critical in this. The authority that we have been building, that we continue to build, we have built over millennia, but especially the humanitarian corridors in this last decade, has established Sant'Egidio, has established the humanitarian corridors, has established refugee resettlement as a moral imperative, as a must, and as a tremendous success. That being said, the climate crisis also just underlines the need, as we've been saying, for preventative work, for building communities building societies that are capable of sustaining themselves, that are peaceful, and that have a future. I won't go too long because I'm conscious of the time here, but I would like to underline the DREAM program, which is Sant'Egidio's HIV/AIDS project in sub-Saharan Africa, our peace work all over the world, and the civil society efforts that I talked about at the beginning, whether they be focusing on folks in the street or the elderly or children, that are all part of building societies of justice and peace that will be able to respond more directly, more personally to the climate crisis and the consequences that it brings. And my last point is just a case story of a single person that I think exemplifies a lot of these trends and movements that all come together, and that's Floribert Buonachui. Floribert Buonachui was a young man who was born in 1980 and killed in 2007 in Goma, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is why I was so appreciative of Chitsat for mentioning the country earlier. And why do I mention him? He was recently beatified in the Catholic Church. And the reason he was beatified was that Floribert was a member of the community of Sant'Egidio, who we see on the right-hand image in this icon of him, was responsible for the School of Peace in Goma. This was a program, and still is, that responded to the needs of street children, children that had run away from their families or whose families had been killed. Again, folks who we can, and people and stories that we can imagine only growing in the coming climate crisis. And professionally, he was a customs officer. And he was killed in 2007 because, as a customs officer, he had refused the passage of spoiled rice from Rwanda into his city, conscious that he was responsible for protecting the children that he knew and the people around him. I bring him up because there's going to be a response. There is already, I should say, there will be, and there already is, a responsibility for all of us to ask ourselves what our role is to protect those in need, to stand up for what's right. Floribert, I think, is of course an extreme, but an example of what is coming, what has already happened, and what unfortunately will continue to happen to those who are on the margins. We know that the poor will suffer and are suffering more because of the climate crisis, that issues of food security and the like will be only exacerbated. And there will be a question of how to respond. Floribert, I think, rooted in his faith, gives us an example that all of us have the responsibility to answer in our own way and to build a better future together. I close appreciation for Allegra, for Angel, for Chitsat, for all again. If anyone would like to learn more, our website is here below, and I'm here for a few more questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Pietro, and thank you, everybody. Moving into our Q&A or discussion section, I have a couple of questions that I'd love to bring into discussion with our full panel here. And again, in the meantime, participants, feel free to drop your questions, comments, observations into the chat. We'd love to have your voices in the room as well. One of the core themes of this panel that we've all been talking about really from the beginning of our conversations over the last month or two is really the question of what does it mean to be a faith-based group or faith-based organization working in this sector or these sectors, since it's really many overlapping sectors. And what is sort of unique about being a faith-based group compared to secular service providers, researchers, governments, NGOs, which each have their own particular mandate. How do faith and values shape the approaches that your groups all bring? I think, Pietro, you talked about this quite a bit. So I would love to give a moment for Chitsat and Angel if there was, more you wanted to explore on this or emphasize on this, either from your own experience at ERD or what you're also seeing from faith leaders you work with on the ground.
Just to kind of rephrase your question, so why faith actors over other actors, correct?
Yeah, not sort of over as in, better, but as in what's the particular approach and the unique gifts that faith actors do, and maybe also some things that faith actors are not doing, right? Because they're focused on other
Yes.
certain mandates.
Right. So, I think as I have mentioned in my presentation that institutions are there, they're there to stay. They have been a part of this social fabric long before the crises begin, and they will remain even after the external agencies leave. We can, with the current climate within the development sector, fundings could stop anytime. So what does it mean when an organization like Episcopal Relief and Development leave? Which is where us empowering the local actors, the local churches, that's why it is so important because they're not only providing um, programming, they're essentially anchoring these community members. And within our organization, I have missed to point it out. When we work with community members, we do not refer to the community members as beneficiaries. We refer to them as participants because we want to give them the dignity at the end of the day. So, talking about the faith actors, I think when it comes to essentially helping within the context of climate displacement and climate migration, we can't just focus on the fact that there are material loss and asset loss, and there's a loss of identity, belonging, and spiritual health as well. I think faith actors do that work a little bit better than I would say other external actors. And in terms of what they may be lacking in, um, I guess the institutional strengthening piece, so capabilities, maybe they're limited. So for a lot of our partners on the ground, so what does it mean to not have the greatest internet, like the infrastructures? So they may be limited in terms of that. Angel, if you have anything else to add.
Sure, Chitsat. I think what you shared is on the nose, and at the same time, I want to emphasize that faith actors are the ones who stay the longest. And so going back to the idea that they may not move the fastest or have the largest budgets, they also certainly don't arrive with blueprints. They start with listening, actively listening. At least that's the general intention with us here at Episcopal Relief and Development. And also, it's not about separating the practical from the spiritual. And so that's really what allows us collectively to take root and last beyond the project or funding cycle.
Pietro, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, sure. No, I think what what I what I was trying to underline in our experience of Sant'Egidio is that it's true for us, but it's true for any religious movement, organization, religious identity, right? When we say religious organization, we might think, well, I think it's important to underline the fact that that includes both legal structures that dioceses or general geographic areas might construct to then be legally operative or execute their practical programming. But more importantly, we're talking about the actual people who are participating and believing in this faith, in this tradition, that, as Angel says, doesn't end. There's no distinction between spiritual and practical. Like, life is life. And so when you are a religious person and you have a group of religious people, you are kind of, in a sense, by definition, a religious community, religious organization. You have united in a way that is incomparable. Like there is nothing else that unites people so universally and so deeply. I mean, unfortunately, people often find themselves united by race or by gender or by whatever other identity. But religious identity tends to have, I should say, uh, a more universal component, and frankly, a more historical and a more long-lasting component, both looking back to the past and grounding your identity within centuries, if not millennia, of history, and a future-looking one, both in terms of the continuation of your faith tradition and one's own. Now I speak for some religious traditions, not all here, but belief in something beyond. And so there's an incomparable unity that binds people together in faith, uh, and faith-based institutions that are the expression of people who share these convictions are likewise incomparable.
If I may add a little bit more to that, actually, when Pietro talked about religious identity, it kind of made me realize that um, the trust that these religious institutions bring, I think it's quite strong. So for example, I talk a little bit about the activities that my partners are doing on the ground, which is savings with education. And a lot of the community members, when they're participating in these savings group, there are many development organizations who participate in microfinance and savings groups, and the theme is always people don't want to always save money because they don't trust it. But with the faith networks, I think we navigate that a little bit more easier compared to um, other development agencies um, doing this specifically.
So interesting. One of the themes that I've also especially been hearing in what each of you shared is the theme of continuity, right? Faith actors are not showing up to like provide a service in a particular situation. They're already there. Like they're already there. These relationships are already existing, ongoing, and are deepened through whatever area of need happens to be present at a given time. As well as the opportunity to integrate new challenges into an ongoing story of a community, right? I think there's some real like resilience in that form of narrative shaping. Along these lines, sort of to flip it in a different direction, I'm curious what each of you would like other entities, organizations to know about faith-based actors. What do you, if there's any maybe pain points, right, or sort of areas of dissonance that have sometimes come up, what do you wish secular organizations might might benefit from knowing about how faith actors work, or that if you wish they might learn from these models and integrate those practices themselves?
I'll say something. One is as on a personal level, I hate to say this, on a practical level, I feel the need, which is to say, to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. As I said, the humanitarian corridors are relatively small in the grand scheme of need, but there's something, and every life counts. There's old ancient Jewish wisdom, right? That you save one life, you save the world. And I think that every person, every organization that feels compelled is an expression of an innate human desire to help one another, to recognize our human family. And that desire will be expressed in different ways, with different focuses, with different, particulars. And none of us, whether they are secular or not, organizations, should feel that we can or need to cover everything and cover everyone. And neither should we be criticizing those who are focusing on a specific issue, demographic, area, whatever it is. But instead need to be finding, as Pope John the 23rd would say, focusing on what unites rather than on what divides. And I think this, especially speaking as a Catholic, is a lesson that we've been trying to learn more and more since the Second Vatican Council, but one that I think has been really helpful in guiding the church in the last 80 years, and I hope one that other actors can take into account as well.
I'd also like to add, I think going back to what faith actors can provide, I think that trust and moral authority are two big things. And at the same time, I think that we sometimes struggle to speak the technical language of development. And so I think what others could learn from us is that not only transformation takes time, requiring sometimes a lot of patience, and presence. What we can learn from them is really how to measure and communicate impact better. I hear it from partners all the time, and also see in their work prior to joining together forces. There's a whole lot happening in the field, on the ground, and it's not always documented. It's not always measured. That mentality isn't always in place. And so I really believe that together we can pair heart and evidence.
Great, thank you. One question that came in from the chat from Kate, talking about changing landscape, which is that you mentioned one area where the work had to back off a little bit due to changing local conditions. But of course, structurally, systematically, there's a whole lots of changes happening in the global funding landscape, humanitarian landscape, et cetera. And I'm wondering whether you've seen any discussions about faith-based actors adapting to these new conditions. I'm sure that's broad, and other actors might have their own ways that they're handling that. But for any of the groups that you work with or see, have you seen change or adaptations to the evolving landscape?
Sure. Not specifically, I think to answer Kate's question more specifically in terms of the adaptations to the current condition, I would like to kind of answer it in the context of my other partner in Kenya. It's called ADS Mount Kenya East. They are also the development arm of the Anglican Church. So ADS Mount Kenya East has a lot of other donors or partners who have their funding from USAID. So with the dismantling of USAID, a lot of the projects have stopped. And within that scene, the conversations were very, very honest. They mentioned to us the areas that they need more support on. So at the end of the day, we're all in the development field together. Our most important priority is bringing the most impact to the community members. So based on their requests, we were able to kind of change our lens and kind of step into that. And another thing that I would like to add is at the end of the day, um, as Episcopal Relief and Development, we want sustainability for our partners. We want to set them up for success. We want to essentially let them be okay when we leave. So, as I've mentioned in Episcopal Relief and Development, we have 4 focus areas. So, if the climate resilience program has been ongoing with a certain partner for 5 years, 6 years, whatever the timeline may be, at one point that climate resilience programming may stop, but doesn't mean that the partnership ends. At that point, we would have belief that the partner is now sustainable, where they have that community ownership to continue on the activities that we have provided during the project. Now we've changed our focus to perhaps early childhood development. We change our focus to gender empowerment. So I hope this kind of gave the answer to what Kate was looking for.
Yeah, it sounds like on 2 levels it did. I want to open this space to if any of you have any questions for each other, or things that you wanted to add that maybe got missed. Or actually, to keep that in mind, we have a question from Shannon. Interfaith collaboration, I think, is the intent of the question. interfaith collaboration in locations that you've seen,
I could speak on that.
or
So
interfaith or ecumenical. Yeah.
sure. So we work very closely with Islamic Relief USA, which is actually one of my previous organization. We work with Islamic Relief in Liberia, and when we are this is specifically within our gender work, so I can't really speak on the climate front for that. But we make sure to essentially engage all the faith leaders from different communities. So in the case of Liberia, we're working with the Muslim imams and the priest, the bishops from the churches, and they come together to essentially relay gender messaging. And specifically in the case of Kenya, also actually within the DRC context as well, even though within my People on the Move project sites, there may not be a lot of Muslims present or other faith groups present, but within my other climate group context, we make sure that when we are actually including a different faith group, we are or our partners are including the leaders of that specific faith as well.
I could also add from the Latin American region, we absolutely collaborate closely with ecumenical and interfaith groups on the ground. For example, in the Amazon in Brazil, the diocese works alongside Catholic and evangelical parishes and also secular partners, like I mentioned while I was presenting, the International Education Group in Brazil and also the Public Defender's Office. These partnerships, without a doubt, exist to strengthen what's going on the ground and support vulnerable groups like migrants. And Honduras also, the partner Bangladesh engages with local ecumenical councils and municipal leaders, all in the name of getting programming planned for, designed, and lifted off the ground. Collaboration here in the sense of talking about these extensions really aren't about labels. It's really about faith in action.
I'll add quickly from our side. As I mentioned, the humanitarian corridors are conducted mostly on an ecumenical basis with the Waldensian Table, which is a Protestant denomination in Italy. Sant'Egidio's, though, efforts for more sustainable, just societies that, in light of this context, are more able to address the climate crisis in their own situations. Our approach is really intentional about cultivating interfaith relationships. And in particular, I know we are kind of running into conflicting schedules here, but in Rome right now, the 39th gathering of the International Pray for Peace, which Sant'Egidio organizes every year, is meeting, bringing together high-level religious leaders, including Pope Leo tomorrow, to confront together the issue of peace and how religious leaders can come together to guide communities in building more sustainable communities and societies.
Great. Thank you all so much. Any closing questions or reflections for the time being?
I'll just say thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated the time. I really appreciated Angel and Chitsad's presentation. Thank you, Allegra, for the invitation. Thank you again to the team that organized this. I'm hopeful for the future. As a Catholic, we're celebrating the Jubilee Year of Hope. And while there don't seem to be that many occasions for hope in the world, I think it's important for us to take opportunities like this to learn from one another, to share stories of hope, especially in the case of the climate crisis that predates the past year by a long run and will certainly continue past the next 4, 5, 6. And so, thank you.
I share Pietro's sentiment as well. Thank you for the organizers, Allegra for the invitation, and Pietro also for your informative presentation as well, and Angel for being a great collaborator. And also, of course, like a huge thank you to the participants who have been here sitting with us for almost over an hour. So thank you so much for your time and your engagement. My one takeaway or my one message, if you could share it forward, is please like don't discount the faith actors, because sometimes it may seem as though the capacities that faith actors carry is not the highest, but it's not necessarily the faith network's fault. It's essentially the system's failure to it's a system's failure. So I hope all the agencies and entities within the development sector come together to strengthen that capacity as well.
I also want to thank everyone here for the time, the energy, the attention, and at the same time, as far as a takeaway, I think that if there's one thing I can leave everyone is that accompaniment is slow by design. And so in a world where quick is everything, get this done quick and yesterday, real change doesn't happen from moving fast. It comes from staying faithful. And so really accompaniment for me, and I'm hoping that the message has come across, is that presence is what truly outlasts crisis. That's all. Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you. I have no need to add an inspirational closing remark because each of you did. That was so beautiful. But truly, yeah, leaning into hope and into endurance, and the endurance that comes through real relationship, I think is sort of an essential call of this time. Again, my gratitude to each of the panelists, to the organizers, and to everyone who's with us this afternoon, and wishing everyone a beautiful evening wherever you are. Thank you.